Okay, so this one is going to be about balance, mostly encounter balance, mission, like adventure balance, those kinds of balances. So, diving into another anecdote, in our 40K game, we're probably about to party wipe. We're down to no resources we're in this ship, we're trying to hunt this thing, and it's just not going well. We've made a variety of poor decisions, some bad luck, some good luck, back and forth. Some of the design for the game itself has been, we're testing stuff, but, so I'm going to get into it, but right off the bat, I want to say, I don't think this encounter is overtuned for the most part, but let's get into it. This section of road is a little loud, but so first, the initial premise of this mission was we just get into the ship, we have to hunt down the captain, leader, owner of the ship, kill him, and then the rest of them would just fall in line, and we can just make them leave. And that's kind of it. The DM decided to change it kind of last minute. He had a fun idea. So instead, now of just fighting that guy, we're hunting this little shark servitor who has a bunch of really fucking annoying stuff to deal with. And I'll touch on that kind of idea. Like, there's a line between, how do I want to word it? There's a line when something becomes annoying versus frustrating versus interesting to deal with. I'll get to that. But I think part of it is the idea that the encounter changed midway through. That can be a problem. But so let's look at certain some of the enemies, some of the combatants we've been dealing with. So first, there's all of the House Goliath monsters, and they're just big dudes. They've got like 80-ish HP, something like that, in that range. Usually one of us can take them down in one turn if most of our attacks hit, that kind of thing. But they do a lot of damage also. They have a lot of capabilities. Some of them have melta weapons, some of them just do a shit ton of damage. And it's like, and this is where, when I'm designing monsters, this is where I kind of put a lot of thought into it. Like, okay, how many attacks should this make? Exactly how much damage should this do? Because I want to do, have the monsters capable of a certain amount of damage each turn. And that's just where I kind of hone in on monster design and encounter design, because those things feel real to me. Those are things that I can control, and they give me just better control of a fight. Because all I'm ever really trying to do, I just want to make a fight interesting, and that's one of the tools at my disposal in how I go about it. Our DM for this game, I'm not sure he would say the same thing, but that's up to him. So in a vacuum, a lot of these monsters are good. I like them, but we've been fighting, we fought through 40 of them. We fought through just a shit ton of them, and we're just really, really low on resources now. And like I said, we made some poor decisions. We split up in cases we probably shouldn't have. And if we survive this, my character in particular is going to learn from that, because he views himself as this kind of, not exactly as a lone combatant, but that's what the Carcharodons do a lot of the time. they go off on their own and they do these kind of surgical stealth strikes, like Raven Guard. But he's probably learning that in a lot of the situations he's finding himself in the Death Watch, that's probably not a good idea. So, but neither here nor there. And then there's some of the, quote, the newer monsters he's designed. The Geoffs, the big giant shark constructs. There's one or two things about their design I don't like. The one, they've got big, super heavy weapons. Las cannons, auto cannons, that kind of thing. But then they've got a melee attack that grabs you on hit. And they have multi-attack with that. I don't think I like that. And it's for a fairly petty reason. It's for the same reason. It's a similar problem I have with shooters. Like, in Marvel Rivals, the fact that guns do more damage than melee attacks fucking bothers me. It really bothers me. And this is in the idea of melee-focused characters. Their melee attacks do less damage, and less damage over time, than a lot of the ranged characters' ranged options. That bothers me. Because, to me, in a game setting, I know in real life it's different. It's a fucking gun in real life. But in a game, the main advantage of a ranged weapon should be the fact that it's ranged. You have way more range. You can engage and deal damage to your target way before they can even hope to do anything. So that's my core philosophy on ranged versus melee stuff. Such that when a monster or a character or whatever has a main ranged option like a heavy las cannon or auto cannon, I feel like their melee options should be in some way subpar. That is my thought process. That said, that is not always the case in reality in a lot of design, because I try to design things in a, quote, balanced way. I'm always thinking about min-maxing something as if you're designing a monster balanced against other monsters or something. And that's not always the case, but that is my gut reaction. So the fact that these monsters with giant cannons that you have to find a way to close the distance to deal with, then have multi-attack on their relatively powerful melee attacks, that offends me. So there's that. And then also in another video I talked about their chain bite mechanic, which I think is really interesting, where, if you get bit and grappled, which, especially considering the bite leads to this kind of thing, I feel like there should be a save to avoid getting bit. I'm not a huge fan of automatic rider effects, which is something the new D&D Monster Manual has done. Yeah, sure, it saves time, but also if you get hit by a wolf now, you're just automatically knocked prone. Or you're automatically grappled, or you're automatically restrained and you can't do anything about it. That bothers me too. I've never been a huge fan of the auto grapple thing, because in a lot of ways I feel like that takes away players' agency, and I'm not a huge fan of using it. Maybe grapple is fine, because all that, at the core, all grappling does is make it so you can't move away. That can be fine. But when it leads into other powerful effects, I'm less inclined to like it. And for this monster, when it grapples you on its turn, it can attack a grappled target for a number of attacks that automatically hit, and the number of attacks is equal to 3d6, which I get the idea, but this is something else I kind of want to touch on, where it makes sense when you're designing in a vacuum to have something like this. But if you're designing for an encounter or a mission or a particular party, which this case kind of is, at that point it might as well be, if you attack a target you have grappled, if they get hit by this next attack, it automatically kills them, because that's essentially what it does. It does it's like 3d6 damage plus attribute with the strength modifier times 3d6 attacks, which is what, minimum 3.5, 3.5, 3.5, 10, like average of 11 attacks. Yeah, that's going to automatically kill whoever. So you could just write it as automatically kill the target. You could. But, that's kind of whatever. But this isn't great. But that's kind of semantics. It depends on what you're, how you're trying to design it. If you're designing, like I said, in a vacuum, you're just making a monster of a certain power level. Yeah, that makes sense to do it. But at the same time, these servitors are just absurdly dangerous at any range, and you just kind of don't want to deal with them, which evokes a certain experience. But like at that, once you're getting into these monsters, I definitely feel like the encounter is a little overtuned. Once you're getting into these Geoff things, so I think all the Goliaths, it took getting through 3 different encounters with a few Goliaths and a bunch of regular dudes to get us down to half of our resources, but we used a ton of stims getting through those. So I don't know, maybe once the mission is over, regardless of which way it goes, we can we can kind of go over the whole thing, and maybe we can math it out. But I don't know, looking at from where we are now, I'm not sure if we could. We would have had to roll. We would have had to been really lucky to succeed in this mission, I feel like. But for now, let's get in. I'm going to get into the Geoff unit a little bit. And what this thing does is it moves really quick. It leaves bubbles. It's designed like Geoff from Rivals, which is really interesting. It's a really funny design. But it has 2 properties. One, it's got a, is it a 4-up save? Yeah, it's got a 4-up save. And then it has a displacement property where whenever it does get hit, it splits into 2 and you don't know which is which. I think those 2 properties together lead to a lot of frustration. At least it did for me. To the point that I had to use haste just to almost kill it on my own. And granted, it was on my own. But I think it's still relatively frustrating having both of those properties together. And a big part of it was the fact that I thought it was completely avoiding damage whenever it would split. So that's a big point of the frustration there. But it's still you have to hunt it down each time. Each time you hit it, you have to decide which one is it. So that's interesting. I mean, I think if it didn't have the 4-up save feature, or if there was some way to mitigate that feature besides grappling it, maybe I should have just grappled it. But that's probably a mistake on my part. I should have just fucking grappled it. But I don't know. It also had that chain bite feature, which it probably would have used, and I don't know what its damage output would have been at that point. So I don't know. I think either way, there's a lot of like really risky choices in design taken here, which is really fucking cool. But somebody's shining something. But I'm thinking, at least for this permutation of the game, we had those personal force fields going. And I know, like in the base game, you have, you roll the hit, and then you get hit, and then you have like an invulnerability save, to my knowledge. And that's kind of what our personal force fields are doing. But our personal force fields, they've got this property where if you roll a 1, they become inoperable until the next short rest, which I feel like maybe isn't the best idea. Maybe they should work kind of the same way that like this Jeff unit does. They're just kind of always on. But maybe if you roll a 1, they don't work for the rest of the round, or you need to take an action to restart it or something, Which I'm probably going to steal this kind of idea and modify my my SRAs for my SCP game a little bit. But like I've said before, this is kind of the point of the game of design. I'm always interested in trying to fine tune like what's too much, what's too powerful, what's too weak, where's that Goldilocks zone. Like I always want to chase the perfect design, more or less. And the idea is you can never get there, but you got to chase it anyway, because that's how you improve. You don't want to get complacent in your design. You want to improve it as much as you can. And of course, you don't want to innovate just for the sake of innovation. If something works, just use it. You don't have to change it just to change it. And that's a big philosophy we use, in the game. Like in a moment-to-moment call, like, oh, shouldn't it work this way? This is how it works right now. We can talk about it later. And that's a good rule to fall back on. Don't innovate too much, especially in the game itself when you're running it. But yeah, we'll be back to that game in 2 weeks. We'll see if we're making new characters or not, which, I hope we're not. Well, we'll see. But if we are, we are. That's all I got for you today.